In the middle of a blizzard that erased roads, signals, and hope, a silent veteran heard something the storm couldn't hide, a child crying in the woods. What he found wasn't just a lost boy, but a wounded dog caught in an illegal trap, bleeding into the snow, and a truth someone was willing to kill to bury. As shadows closed in and powerful men began hunting what they thought was just an animal, one man had to decide whether to walk away or stand alone against everything. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Frosthaven, Montana wasn't the kind of town you stumbled into. It sat at the end of a narrowing valley where the paved road gave up and the mountains took over. Two short streets cut through a handful of buildings, an all-night diner, a hardware store, a feed shop, and then everything thinned into trees, snow fences, and scattered cabins that faced the wind like they'd been taught to expect punishment. Late November here didn't feel like a season, it felt like a warning. Cold pressed in from every direction, damp and heavy, turning breath into smoke and skin into something that cracked if you forgot your gloves for 10 minutes. That afternoon, the sky hung low and bruised, and snow moved sideways in sharp sheets, whitening the world without softening it. Cole Rourke lived outside town, far enough that he could go weeks without seeing another person unless he chose to. He was 41, tall, built lean but dense, with the kind of strength that comes from carrying weight over distance rather than lifting it for show. His hair was cut close to the scalp, dark with faint gray at the temples. A short, practical beard framed a hard jawline, and a thin scar split one eyebrow, pale against weathered skin. His eyes were a muted gray-blue, steady, guarded, never lingering on anything too long. People in Frosthaven called him unfriendly, but that wasn't quite right. He simply didn't spend words where they wouldn't help. Years ago, he had learned that attention could keep you alive, and that lesson had followed him home. He had left the service, but his mind still scanned rooms, measured exits, and listened for sounds most people ignored. It wasn't drama, it was residue. He kept the cabin running on his own terms, wood stacked high, tools organized, emergency supplies where he could reach them in the dark. On storm days, he also did quiet maintenance work for the county, battery checks, relay inspections, whatever kept radios alive when cell towers failed. It paid a little, but more than that, it made sense. In places like Frosthaven, a dead power line or a silent repeater could turn a mistake into a body. Briggs rode with him. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, sable with tan markings, thick coat built for winter, broad paws that didn't hesitate on ice. His ears stayed upright, not twitchy, just alert. There was a disciplined stillness to him that came from training and routine. Briggs wasn't a dog that filled space with noise. He watched, listened, and waited for cues. A small notch in one ear and a faint scar along the shoulder suggested he'd been through something that left marks without leaving fear. Cole didn't dress that up with sentiment. He just trusted the dog, and in return, Briggs stayed close as if proximity itself were part of the job. That afternoon, Cole loaded a canvas tool bag into the bed of his old pickup, checked the chains, and pulled onto the service road that climbed above the valley. The truck was worn but dependable, and he drove it like he drove everything, steady, precise, never in a hurry that could cost him traction. Snow battered the hood, and wind shoved at the vehicle in blunt gusts. The wipers fought to keep the windshield clear, and the headlight beams tunneled into a world of white motion. As the road rose, trees tightened in around the shoulders, dark trunks and heavy boughs bending under accumulating weight. Cole kept his eyes moving, tree line, ditch, the curve ahead. He looked for downed limbs, fresh drifts, the polished shine of black ice. Frosthaven's storms were not unpredictable, but they were unforgiving. He was halfway to the relay station when Briggs shifted in the passenger seat. It wasn't dramatic. Briggs didn't bark or paw at the glass. He simply lifted his head and went rigid, nose pulling air as if the storm carried a message meant for him alone. His gaze fixed on the right side of the road where the forest dipped into a shallow ravine. Cole eased off the accelerator and let the truck roll. But he felt the change before he named it, the same thin edge of alertness he'd learned to respect. He pulled onto a wider shoulder and cut the engine. The sudden quiet made the wind sound louder, sharper, as if the storm had moved closer. Briggs looked at him once, waiting. Cole opened the door. Snow slapped his face. He grabbed his flashlight and a compact first aid pouch from the console, then stepped into the cold with boots that bit into crusted snow. Briggs dropped down beside him, posture low and focused, nose already working. They moved into the trees. The forest swallowed the truck's silhouette within seconds. Snow sifted through branches and stung exposed skin. The air smelled of pine resin and frozen earth, until it didn't. After only a few yards, Cole caught a sharper note beneath the natural scents. Metal, blood, and something like old oil. Not a clean smell, not an animal kill, something wrong. Then he heard it, a child's cry, thin and ragged, not the loud sobbing of a tantrum, but the uneven sound of panic pushed past its limit. Cole's shoulders tightened. He didn't pause long enough to think about why the sound hit him the way it did. He just followed it. The ravine opened ahead, a shallow cut with rocks that formed uneven steps. At the bottom, tucked near a leaning spruce, a boy knelt in slush and snow. He looked about 8, small for his age, wearing a red puffer jacket that was too light for this weather and already wet at the cuffs. Blonde hair stuck out from under a knit cap that had slipped off and lay half-buried nearby. His cheeks were raw and bright with cold, tears cutting clean tracks down a face smudged with dirt. His hands shook so badly he couldn't keep them still. Beside him lay a German shepherd larger than Briggs, black and tan coat dulled by snow and grime. The dog's chest rose in tight, controlled breaths. Its left hind leg was trapped in a rusted steel bear trap, teeth sunk deep, metal clamped shut with bone-crushing force. Blood stained the snow dark. The dog didn't thrash or snarl. It held still, trembling with pain, letting out low whimpers that sounded more like restraint than weakness. The boy looked up when Cole appeared, eyes wide and glassy with fear. "Please," he said, voice breaking. "He's hurt. He's really hurt." Cole dropped to one knee, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't trying to be gentle for show. He was trying to keep the scene from getting worse. The dog's ears flattened slightly. And a low rumble stirred in its chest. Warning, not aggression. Briggs stopped at Cole's side, calm but watchful, reading the dog and the boy at the same time. Cole's voice stayed low. "I'm going to open it," he said, more to the dog than the boy. "You hold still, okay?" Then he looked at the child. "What's your name?" Milo," the boy whispered. His lips were blue-tinged, breath coming out in quick bursts. "His name's Atlas. He saved me." Cole nodded once, accepting the information as if it mattered in the immediate way it did. He shifted his flashlight so the beam sat cleanly on the trap's mechanism. He reached into his tool bag and pulled out a compact multi-tool and a short length of cord. "Milo," he said, "I need you to help me. Put your hands on his shoulders, gentle. Talk to him. Look at his eyes, not his leg. Tell him he's safe." Milo scooted closer, hands hovering, then settling with care. He whispered into the dog's ear, words tumbling out unevenly, half prayer and half apology. Atlas's eyes stayed on Milo, steady, as if anchoring himself to the boy's voice. Cole examined the trap quickly. Old steel, illegal teeth, strong spring. He set the cord for leverage, placed the tool at the locking notch, and positioned his weight. His forearms flexed under wet sleeves. He breathed once, then leaned into the pressure with controlled force. The trap shrieked in protest, metal grinding against metal. Cole adjusted his grip and pushed again, harder. The jaws snapped open with a sharp clack that cut through the wind. Atlas jerked once and let out a single yelp, then sagged, shock rolling through him like a wave. Milo made a broken sound in his throat. But Cole was already moving. He wrapped the wounded leg with gauze from his kit, applying pressure where the blood pooled, then stabilized it with a splint improvised from a straight branch and cord. His hands were steady, precise, not rushed. He spoke as he worked, voice firm enough to keep Milo anchored. "He's in shock," Cole said. "We're going to get him warm. You did the right thing staying here. You hear me? You did the right thing." Briggs stood close, shoulder brushing Cole's arm, quiet presence and extra heat. The storm thickened around them, snow falling heavier now, turning the ravine into a bowl filling fast. Cole glanced up toward the road and saw how quickly the world was disappearing under white. Time mattered. Exposure mattered. If they stayed here, all of them would start losing the fight they hadn't chosen. Cole tightened the last wrap, checked Atlas's breathing, then looked at Milo. "Can you walk?" he asked. Milo nodded quickly, though his legs wobbled when he tried to stand. Cole shifted his stance and slid his arms under Atlas's chest and hips. The dog was heavy, 80 pounds at least, but Cole lifted him with a practiced economy, as if weight were just another fact to manage. Atlas's head lolled for a second, then steadied. He let out a low breath, and Milo moved in close, one hand on the dog's neck like a promise. Cole turned back toward the trees, the storm pressing in at his back. He didn't think about why the mountain always seemed to find him when he wanted to be left alone. He only thought about getting the boy and the wounded dog out of the ravine before the blizzard erased the only path back. Cole moved uphill with Atlas's weight settled against his chest, the dog's body wrapped tight in canvas and cord, breath shallow but steady. Milo stayed close, one mittened hand gripping Atlas's fur at the scruff, as if that contact alone could keep him alive. Briggs took point, nose cutting through the air, choosing a line that avoided drifts and exposed rock. The storm had thickened into a steady roar, snow driving sideways and filling footprints almost as soon as they were made. The ravine behind them disappeared under white, and the road beyond it might as well have been another country. The climb taxed Milo first. His steps shortened, knees wobbling as cold and adrenaline burned off together. Cole adjusted his pace without comment, shifting Atlas higher to keep the dog's airway clear. He watched Milo's shoulders, the set of his jaw, at the way he tried to hide fear by moving faster than he should. When Milo stumbled, Cole stopped immediately, planted his boots, and waited. "Breathe," he said, not loud, not gentle, just certain. Milo nodded, sucked in air, and steadied. They continued. The cabin came into view as a darker shape against the trees, squat and low, its roof pitched steep to shed snow. Smoke threaded from the stovepipe in a thin, determined line. Cole kicked the door open with his heel and stepped into warmth that hit like a physical thing. He carried Atlas straight to the hearth and laid him on a thick rug within reach of the stove's radiant heat. The dog shuddered once, then settled, eyes half-lidded. Cole peeled away the wet outer wrap, checked the splint, pressed 2 fingers to the inner thigh for pulse. Strong enough, still shocky. He pulled a thermal blanket from a hook and layered it over Atlas's shoulders, careful not to trap moisture. Milo hovered, shaking now that movement had stopped. Cole grabbed a flannel from a peg and draped it around the boy's shoulders, tucking the sleeves like he'd done it 100 times. "Sit," he said, nodding to a stool by the counter. "Hands by the stove, don't touch the iron." Milo obeyed instantly. Briggs circled once, then lay down at Atlas's side, flank pressed close, providing heat without crowding. His ears stayed upright, tracking the sounds outside. The wind hammered the walls. Snow rattled against the windows like thrown gravel. Cole moved through the cabin with practiced economy. Kettle on, water warming, a small syringe for oral fluids ready. He spoke to Atlas as he worked. Not soothing words, but steady narration. What he was doing, what came next, tone even. Unhurried. Atlas's eyes flicked to him, then to Milo, then closed again. Pain kept the dog tethered to the present, but the warmth helped. A knock came hard and sudden, 3 sharp blows that cut through the storm. Milo flinched. Briggs's head lifted, a low sound starting in his chest before Cole raised a hand. "Stay," Cole said to the dog, then went to the door. The woman on the threshold was out of breath and snow-caked, hair plastered to her face beneath a wool beanie pulled too low. She was in her early 30s, tall and lean with a runner's build that the cold hadn't dulled. Her hair, when it showed, was a dark auburn tangled loose from the hat. Her skin was pale and wind-reddened, freckles standing out starkly across her nose. Her eyes, hazel, sharp even through panic, found Milo immediately and locked. "Milo!" she breathed, and then she was inside, dropping to her knees and pulling him into her arms so tightly he squeaked. Her name was Rowan Hale. Cole knew it from the town's quiet currents, if not from conversation. Rowan worked mornings at the diner and nights at the volunteer clinic when storms rolled in. People said she was capable and stubborn, the kind of woman who took responsibility without asking permission. A year ago, her husband, a backcountry ranger, had vanished during a winter patrol. The official search ended. Rowan's didn't. Grief had sharpened her, not softened her, and the edge showed now in the way she scanned the room even while holding her son. Rowan's gaze landed on Atlas, the bandaged leg, the blood-darkened snow melting on the rug. She covered her mouth with one hand. "Oh, God," she said, then looked at Cole. Her voice steadied. "Thank you." Cole nodded once. He didn't reach for gratitude. "He's alive," he said. "That matters." Rowan knelt by Atlas, moving slowly, asking permission with her hands before she touched his ear. Atlas's tail thumped once, weak but unmistakable. Milo smiled for the first time since the ravine, a small, startled thing that vanished as quickly as it came. Rowan straightened. "He followed Milo," she said, words coming out clipped now that the worst fear had passed. "The dog. He showed up by the creek this morning, stayed with him." She looked at the splint, the trap Cole had dragged inside and left by the door. The rusted steel teeth gleamed dully. Her jaw tightened. "That trap wasn't there last season." Cole didn't answer. He poured warm water into a mug, tested it, then let Milo sip. "How far did you range?" he asked Rowan. "Too far," she said. "The storm came fast. I lost his tracks." She paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "Someone else was out there. I heard engines last night, not plows." Cole filed it away without comment. He checked Atlas's gums, then administered a small amount of oral fluids. "We'll keep him warm," he said. "Then we move him to a vet when the road opens." Rowan exhaled, shoulders dropping a fraction. She rubbed her hands together by the stove, then looked up as headlights washed briefly across the cabin's front window. One pass, then gone. The light was wrong for a county rig, too clean, too contained. Briggs rose, crossing to the window. His posture stiffened, tail low. Cole followed his line of sight. Bertha then reached up and doused the main lamp, leaving only the stove's glow. The cabin fell into amber half-light. "Down," he murmured to Briggs. The dog complied, muscles coiled. Rowan noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" she asked. "Could be nothing," Cole said, which was not reassurance so much as honesty. He slid the oak bar into place across the door and moved the trap farther back out of sight. "Storm brings traffic that doesn't belong. We wait." They waited. Snow hissed. The wind pressed. The headlights didn't return. Cole reset the bandage once more, satisfied. Atlas's breathing evened. Shock receded to a manageable edge. Milo sat cross-legged on the floor, flannel sleeves pulled over his hands, eyes fixed on Atlas with a vigilance that mirrored Briggs's earlier focus. Rowan watched Cole work, measuring him. "You're not law," she said, not accusing. "No," Cole replied. "You were military." Cole met her gaze, then looked back to the dog. "A long time ago." Rowan nodded. She didn't push. The cabin held its quiet, the kind that came from shared attention rather than absence. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside, warmth and purpose narrowed the world to what could be controlled. Cole stood and checked the windows once more. He didn't say it aloud, but the thought settled heavy. Traps don't appear by accident, and headlights don't pass a place like his unless there's a reason. For now, Atlas was stable, Milo was safe, and the storm was doing what storms did, covering tracks. That would change by morning. He pulled another log onto the fire and let the night do its work. Morning did not arrive so much as it leaked in, a thin gray light filtering through the storm's last breaths. The wind had backed off during the night, leaving the world packed and quiet, snow smoothed into hard contours that caught sound and held it. Cole woke before the light found the windows. He lay still for a moment, listening to the cabin's small noises, the stove ticking as it cooled, the low rhythmic breathing of dogs, the faint creak of timber under settling snow. Nothing out of place. That, by itself, meant very little. He rose, pulled on boots, and checked Atlas first. The larger shepherd slept on his side, chest moving evenly beneath the thermal blanket. The splint held. The gums were pinker than they'd been, shock receding. Briggs lay curled at Atlas's back like a brace, eyes opening when Cole approached, tail giving a single thump against the floor. Milo was still asleep on the couch, flannel bunched at his shoulders, hair damp where sweat had dried. Rowan sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. She hadn't slept. It showed in the tightness around her eyes and the way she watched the door as if it might open without warning. Cole nodded to her, then moved to the window. The snow had stopped falling but not moving. Fine grains slid along the surface in whispering sheets. Tracks from the night before were gone, erased by wind. He'd expected that. What he hadn't expected was the absence of everything else. No county plow rumble, no distant engine, no human sound at all. Frosthaven felt held. Rowan joined him. In daylight, her composure looked less like calm and more like deliberate control. "Road's still closed," she said. "Clinic radio said the pass won't open until noon at the earliest." Cole didn't take his eyes off the tree line. "We don't move Atlas until a vet can take him," he said. "If someone wants the dog, daylight won't stop them." Rowan's jaw set. Why would anyone want him? Cole considered his answer. He'd found that truth delivered in parts traveled farther than truth dropped whole. "Traps don't set themselves," he said, "and people who run them don't like witnesses." Milo stirred, pushing himself upright, eyes going straight to Atlas. "Is he okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Better," Cole said. "We'll keep it that way." A vehicle engine sounded then, low, controlled, not the strained growl of a plow. It approached slowly, deliberately, as if the driver wanted to be seen. When Cole stepped back from the window and extinguished the overhead light out of habit, he didn't reach for a weapon. He reached for space, clearing a line of sight from the door to the hearth. The knock came a moment later. Firm. Official. Cole opened the door a fraction. The man outside filled the frame without crowding it. He was in his early 50s, tall and broad through the chest with a heavy mustache that had gone gray at the ends. His face was weathered and square, skin roughened by years outdoors, eyes a pale blue that didn't blink often. He wore a county sheriff's jacket with the badge pinned clean and bright. Snow dusted his shoulders without melting. "Morning, Rourke," the man said. His voice was practiced, meant to put people at ease. "Sheriff Denton?" Cole opened the door the rest of the way. "Morning," he replied. Tone neutral. Denton stepped inside, boots planted just past the threshold, gaze sweeping the room in a single, efficient pass. He took in Milo on the couch, Rowan by the table, Atlas on the rug, Briggs at the dog's flank. The sweep paused there for half a second longer than courtesy required. Denton smiled, thin and brief. "Heard there was a kid lost last night," he said. "Storm makes people nervous." Rowan spoke before Cole could. "My son," she said. "He's safe." Denton nodded, as if ticking a box. "Good to hear." His eyes returned to Atlas. "Dog's in rough shape." Cole met his gaze. "He stepped into a trap." Denton's mustache twitched. "Illegal traps are a problem," he said. "We've been trying to get ahead of it." "Trying," Cole repeated. Denton shifted his weight, jacket creasing. And he had the posture of a man used to being deferred to, shoulders back, chin level. "I'll need to see the trap," he said. "And the dog for the report." Rowan stiffened. "The dog stays," she said, "until a vet clears him." Denton looked at her then. Really looked. Something passed behind his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. "Mrs. Hale," he said, name careful. "I'm sorry about your husband." Rowan's mouth tightened. "Then you'll understand why I don't hand over anything without reason." Denton exhaled through his nose, a controlled release. "I'm not here to make trouble." Cole stepped slightly between them, not blocking, just adjusting the geometry. "The trap's by the door," he said. "Take a look. The dog doesn't move." Denton glanced at Cole, measuring. "You always been this protective?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. Denton examined the trap, fingers hovering over rusted teeth without touching. "Nasty," he said. "We'll take it in." "You won't," Cole replied. "Not yet." Denton straightened. "Excuse me?" "Chain of custody matters," Cole said. "Vet sees it first, photographs, then you." The sheriff's smile returned, thinner now. "You telling me how to do my job?" "I'm telling you how evidence works," Cole said. Silence stretched. Outside, the engine idled, a patient animal. Denton looked at Atlas again. His eyes lingered, then moved on. "Fine," he said. "I'll be back." He turned to Milo, softened his voice. "You did good, son, staying put." Milo nodded, eyes flicking to Cole. Denton left without another word. The engine pulled away, tires crunching once before sound vanished into snow. Rowan let out a breath she'd been holding. He didn't come for the trap, she said. No, Cole agreed. They worked the rest of the morning in quiet coordination. Cole reinforced the splint, cleaned the wound edges, monitored Atlas's temperature. Rowan handled the radio, calling the clinic again, arranging transport. Milo fed Briggs kibble with solemn care, whispering updates to Atlas as if the dog could hear through sleep. By mid-morning, Atlas stirred. He lifted his head, eyes finding Milo first, then Cole. His tail thumped weakly. Cole smiled despite himself. He checked the bandage and noticed something new, a small area of fur near Atlas's shoulder, matted in a way that didn't match the injury. He parted the hair gently and froze. A tiny metallic cylinder sat just beneath the skin, no bigger than a grain of rice. It pulsed once, faint red, then dimmed. Cole's face didn't change. He covered the spot, finished the check, and stood. "Rowan," he said quietly, "I need a moment." He retrieved a small tin from a shelf, lined with dull gray metal, and returned. With careful pressure, he extracted the device. The red light pulsed again, brighter this time. Cole dropped it into the tin and closed the lid. The pulse died. Rowan stared. "What is that?" "Not for tracking pets," Cole said. "Not legally." Milo looked between them. "Is Atlas in trouble?" Cole crouched to Milo's level. "Atlas did his job," he said. "We'll do ours." The radio crackled then, clinic confirming a vet could take Atlas by afternoon. Cole nodded once. He looked at the closed tin, then at the window where the sheriff's tracks had already softened. The shape of attention had changed. What came next would not be small. And it would not be polite. He banked the fire and began packing. They would not wait for Denton to decide what mattered. They left the cabin before noon, not because the road had opened, but because waiting had become the more dangerous choice. Cole packed with the same quiet efficiency he'd used his entire adult life, choosing only what mattered and discarding everything else without ceremony. The tin containing the disabled transmitter went into the inner pocket of his parka, pressed close to his chest where body heat wouldn't matter, but habit insisted. Rowan moved beside him, focused and capable, layering decisions one on top of another. Clinic call rerouted, neighbor alerted to watch the place, spare keys hidden where only she would look. Milo sat on the floor next to Atlas, talking in a low voice about the weather, about school, about nothing in particular, as if conversation itself could stitch time together. Atlas was awake now. A pain dulled by medication, he lifted his head when Cole approached, eyes tracking the room with a calm intelligence that went beyond instinct. He was older than Briggs by a year or two, heavier through the shoulders, his black saddle dark against the tan of his ribs. A faint white scar crossed the bridge of his nose, old and clean, the kind that comes from training or work rather than accident. When Cole touched his neck, Atlas didn't flinch. He leaned into the contact, accepting it as fact. Briggs watched from a step back, respectful, tail low but relaxed. The two dogs had sorted themselves without tension. Parallel awareness, no need for dominance. They loaded Atlas into the back of the pickup on a mattress wrapped in tarps, splint secured, heat packs tucked along his flank. Milo climbed in beside him, bundled in layers. A seatbelt fastened around his waist where it would do more comfort than good. Rowan took the passenger seat, her posture upright, eyes forward. Cole drove. The service road had been plowed only once, leaving ridges of compacted snow that tugged at the tires. Cole kept the truck in low gear, hands steady on the wheel, scanning mirrors and tree lines. Frosthaven receded behind them, the diner sign barely visible through the thinning snow. The radio crackled with county chatter, updates about stranded motorists, power outages, clinic capacity, nothing about traps, nothing about dogs. That omission mattered. 10 minutes out, Briggs stiffened again, head lifting from the floorboard. Cole saw it in the mirror before he felt it, another vehicle falling in behind them, far enough to be coincidence, close enough to be deliberate. A dark SUV. Clean lines, no county markings. It matched speed without closing distance. Rowan noticed too. "That's not the clinic," she said. "No," Cole replied. He took the next turn without signaling, onto a logging spur that dropped into thicker timber. The SUV followed. Cole took another turn, tighter this time, letting the road narrow until branches brushed the truck's sides. The SUV slowed, hesitated, then continued. Confirmation arrived without drama. Cole drove for another mile, then pulled over abruptly near a stand of wind-felled pines. He killed the engine and stepped out into the cold, closing the door with care. Rowan's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Briggs was out immediately, body low, alert. Atlas shifted in the bed, ears swiveling. The SUV stopped 50 yards back. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out alone. The hands visible, posture open but controlled. He was late 30s, maybe 40, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal jacket that fit too well to be issued. His beard was trimmed close, edges sharp, hair dark and swept back from a high forehead. His face had strong lines, cheekbones defined, jaw square, but it was the eyes that held attention, flat brown, measuring, never still. He moved like someone who had learned how to be watched. "Morning," he called, voice carrying without effort. "I don't want trouble." Cole didn't move closer. "Then you're in the wrong place." The man smiled slightly as if appreciating the line. "Name's Cade Mercer," he said. "Private security, contract work." "Turn around," Cole said. Cade took a step forward anyway, stopping well outside arm's reach. "Sheriff Denton sent me," he said lightly. "Said there was a dog involved. Thought I'd check before it became a bigger thing." Rowan stepped out of the truck then, placing herself where Cade could see her. "That dog is injured," she said. "We're taking him to a vet." Cade's gaze flicked to the truck bed, lingered just long enough to confirm what he'd already known. "Of course you are," he said. "But you found something else, didn't you?" Cole felt the temperature drop, not from the air. "You should go," he said again. Cade exhaled, slow. "Look," he said, hands still open. "Whatever you think you found, it's not yours to keep. People get hurt when they misunderstand boundaries." Cole's voice stayed level. "You followed a kid and a wounded dog through a storm. Those are your boundaries." The smile vanished. For a moment, Cade looked tired rather than threatening, as if the job had long since eaten whatever patience he'd started with. "Last chance, he said. "Walk away." Briggs stepped forward one pace, not growling, simply present. Cade's eyes flicked to him, assessing. Cole saw the calculation finish and the decision harden. Cade turned back to his SUV. "We'll be in touch," he said, and drove off without spinning the tires. Cole waited until the sound faded completely before climbing back into the truck. His hands didn't shake. His breathing stayed even. Rowan let out a breath. "That wasn't law," she said. "No," Cole agreed, "and that wasn't curiosity." They drove on, taking roads that didn't exist on official maps, old fire cuts, seasonal access lanes Cole had learned over years of solitude. The clinic came into view mid-afternoon, a squat building reinforced against storms, but generators humming out back. Inside, the vet, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and a calm, competent manner, took one look at Atlas and waved them through without questions that mattered. As Atlas was moved onto a gurney, Milo reached out and pressed his forehead to the dog's. Atlas lifted his head just enough to touch him back. Briggs watched from the doorway, tail wagging once, restrained but hopeful. Cole stood back, hands in his pockets, eyes on the tin's outline beneath his parka. The line had been crossed. The map had changed. What came next would follow paths most people never saw, and there would be no official signs pointing the way. He didn't intend to stop now. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet wool, a clean, practical scent that cut through the storm's residue. Atlas lay on his side beneath bright lights, breathing slow and even as the veterinarian worked. Dr. Elaine Morrow was in her mid-40s, compact and precise, steel-gray hair pulled into a knot that didn't move when she did. Her face bore the calm geometry of someone who'd learned to make decisions quickly and live with them. Years in rural practice had carved a steadiness into her that bordered on blunt honesty. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She assessed, acted, and explained only what mattered. "Fracture's stable," she said, fingers moving along the splint, checking alignment. "Soft tissue damage is the bigger issue. He's lucky." Someone knew how to open a trap without tearing everything else apart. Her eyes lifted briefly to Cole, then back to the wound. "I'll sedate lightly, clean it properly, start antibiotics. He'll walk again, might limp. Depends on how well you follow instructions." "We will," Rowan said before Cole could answer. Dr. Morrow nodded. "Good. Then he stays overnight." She paused, gaze narrowing slightly. "This isn't a hunting accident." "No," Cole said. She didn't push. She'd learned long ago that some truths arrived on their own schedule. "I'll have my tech sit with him," she said. "He'll be monitored." Milo hovered until the last second, fingers brushing Atlas's ear before Dr. Morrow wheeled him through swinging doors. Atlas opened his eyes just enough to find the boy, tail giving a faint stubborn thump. Briggs watched, muscles tight. He then settled when Cole placed a hand on his collar. The door closed. The clinic's hum resumed. Outside, afternoon light lay flat and pale across the snow, the storm's edge frayed, but not gone. Cole leaned against the truck, breathing the cold in. Rowan stood beside him, arms folded, gaze on the clinic door as if willing it to open again. Milo sat in the cab, face pressed to the glass, tracking every movement inside. "You didn't tell him everything," Rowan said quietly. "No," Cole replied. "Not yet." She studied his profile. "You think that man, Mercer, will come back?" "Yes. And the sheriff. Especially the sheriff." Rowan absorbed that without flinching. "My husband kept notes," she said. "Maps. He didn't trust digital files." She hesitated, then met Cole's eyes. If Atlas was carrying something, it wasn't by accident. "He trained dogs in search patterns. He believed animals noticed what people missed." Cole nodded. "Where are the notes?" "At home," Rowan said. "Hidden." Cole straightened. "Then we don't go home." They left the clinic with a plan that fit the daylight they had left. Cole drove them toward the edge of town, then beyond it, away from paved certainty. He took roads that thinned into tracks that became memory. Briggs rode alert in the back seat now, posture upright, head turning with each shift of the truck. Milo asked fewer questions than Cole expected. Fear had sharpened him. It showed in the way he watched mirrors, the way he listened. They reached the old service yard just before dusk. It had once belonged to the county, a maintenance hub for plows and graders before budgets shrank and priorities shifted. Now it sat half-forgotten at the edge of a cut bank, chain-link fence sagging, a corrugated shed leaning under accumulated snow. A single light burned inside. The man who answered Cole's knock filled the doorway with a familiar, stubborn presence. Elias Wynn, known to most as Gearbox, was pushing 70, broad through the shoulders despite the stoop age had pressed into him. His beard was a tangled mix of white and iron gray, his hands scarred and permanently stained with oil. Thick goggles hung around his neck, lenses fogged from warmth. He smelled like grease and old wood smoke. His eyes, however, were sharp and amused, the kind that missed nothing while pretending not to look. "You're early," Gearbox said, voice gravelly. "And you brought company." "Need a favor," Cole replied. Gearbox's gaze slid to Rowan, then Milo, then Briggs. "That dog's got sense," he said, nodding once. "Come in before the cold decides to make a point." Inside, the shed was a cathedral of practical invention. Parts hung from pegboards, labeled in a hand that had grown cramped but legible. A small generator hummed in the corner, feeding power to a workbench crowded with instruments both modern and improvised. Heat rose from a barrel stove, steady and dry. Gearbox listened without interruption as Cole laid out what he could, choosing words carefully. He didn't mention the confrontation's tone, only its facts. He placed the tin on the bench and opened it. The device lay inside, inert. Gearbox leaned in, adjusting his goggles. He didn't touch it at first. "Subdermal," he murmured. "High-grade casing, not a pet tracker." He glanced up. "You know that." "I do," Cole said. Ma Gearbox finally picked it up with tweezers, turning it under the light. "Beacon," he said. "Short-burst transmitter. Used to find things people don't want to lose." His mouth flattened. "Or people." Rowan's hands clenched. "My husband," she said softly. Gearbox set the device down. "Wouldn't surprise me," he said. "This valley's been on someone's map for a while, not ours." He moved to a bank of old monitors, powering one on. "I can shield it," he said. "Not forever, but long enough to buy time." He looked at Cole. "Time costs." "I know," Cole replied. They ate in silence, sandwiches assembled from what Gearbox had on hand, hot coffee poured thick and strong. Milo relaxed enough to talk, telling Gearbox about Atlas's tail thump, about how brave he was. Gearbox listened with a gentleness that didn't contradict his rough edges. Night fell hard and fast. Wind picked up again, rattling the shed skin. Cole checked the perimeter once, then again. He didn't miss the way headlights slowed on the access road before moving on. Not stopping, just confirming. Gearbox killed the overhead light and left the bench lamp on. "They're testing you," he said, "seeing where you run." Cole nodded. "Then we don't." Gearbox smiled, a thin, approving line. "I like that." He finished rigging the shield, the device disappearing into a layered box lined with scavenged materials. The monitor steadied. "That'll keep it quiet," he said, "for now." Rowan leaned back, exhaustion finally claiming ground. Milo slept curled on a cot, Briggs lying at his feet, ears twitching even in rest. Cole sat with his back to the bench, eyes on the door. On the memory of Mercer's gaze replaying without invitation, the body remembered patterns even when the mind wanted distance. Before dawn, the radio crackled. County chatter shifted tone, units repositioning, a quiet alert issued without explanation. Gearbox listened, head cocked. "They're tightening," he said. "Means you touched something worth the effort." Cole stood. He didn't look tired. He looked ready. "At first light," he said, "we move again." They would not be chased into mistakes. They would choose their ground. Outside, the storm leaned back in, patient as a predator. They left Gearbox's yard before the sun cleared the ridge, moving in the colorless hour when the world still hadn't decided what it would show. Cole drove with the headlights off, following a ribbon of packed snow that reflected just enough starlight to read the ground. Rowan sat beside him, jacket zipped to her chin, hair pulled back in a practical knot that left her face open and severe. Milo slept in the back seat, curled toward Briggs, who lay lengthwise with his chin on his paws, eyes open, alert even in rest. The shielded box with the disabled beacon rode beneath the bench seat, wrapped and wedged so it wouldn't rattle. Cole didn't look at it. He felt its presence like a weight that had learned his pulse. They took a switchback that didn't exist on county maps, a service cut from decades ago when logging had teeth and money moved differently. The road climbed into limestone country where trees thinned and rocks shouldered through the soil. The air sharpened, sound carried farther. Cole slowed and listened, letting the engine idle down to a whisper before killing it altogether. The land here had a memory. He had learned that long before Frosthaven, learned it in places where footsteps mattered and mistakes echoed. He stepped out, tested the snow with his boot, and studied the slope. Tracks showed faintly, 2 sets of tires from the night before, heavier than his truck, consistent spacing, careful driving. They led upslope, toward an old quarry the locals called Northline. Officially abandoned, unofficially it never slept. Rowan followed him, breath fogging. "My husband wrote about this place," she said quietly. "He said the ground sounded wrong." Cole glanced at her. "Ground always answers," he said. "Most people don't listen long enough." They walked the last half mile, leaving the truck concealed among wind-felled pines. Milo protested at first, then fell silent when Cole knelt to his level. "Stay close," Cole said. "Touch Briggs if you're unsure." Milo nodded, hand finding the dog's collar like a handle. Briggs leaned into him once, a wordless agreement. The quarry opened ahead as a bowl of pale stone, ringed by scrub and snow. Equipment sat scattered in frozen poses, conveyors half buried, rusted loaders tilted like tired animals. A chain-link fence sagged in sections, gates wired shut in ways that suggested maintenance rather than neglect. Wind slid over the rim and fell into the pit, making a sound like distant surf. Cole felt it then. Vibration underfoot, subtle but present, not wind, not machinery running full, something rhythmic, controlled. He crouched, pressed his palm to the ground and closed his eyes. The stone hummed back, faint and regular. "Seismic," Rowan whispered. "Yes," Cole said. "They're scanning." They moved laterally along the rim, staying low, using shadow and rock. Briggs paced without pulling, matching Cole's cadence. Milo stepped where Cole stepped, learning quickly. At a break in the fence, Cole slipped through and led them down a maintenance path that cut behind a stacked wall of limestone blocks. A man waited there, leaning on a walking stick cut from juniper. He was old in a way that came from use rather than years, mid-70s maybe, thin but tough, face creased deep as dry riverbeds. And one eye was clouded milky white, the other sharp and bright beneath a shock of unkempt silver hair. He wore patched coveralls over thermal layers, boots mended more than once. When he smiled, it was without warmth, but not without purpose. "About time," he said. "I was wondering who they'd send." Cole didn't raise his voice. "Garrick," he said. "You still counting breaths?" "Only when they matter," Garrick replied. He tapped the ground with his stick. "They woke the rock. That's a mistake." Garrick had once worked nights at Northline before it closed. He'd been fired for asking questions that didn't fit payroll. The town called him cracked. The mountain called him accurate. He knew every drain, every hollow, every place the stone rang hollow when struck. He looked at Rowan and Milo, then at Briggs. His expression softened a fraction. "You brought witnesses," he said. "We brought truth," Rowan said. Garrick chuckled dryly. "Same thing, if you live long enough." He led them through a slot in the rock into a service tunnel masked by collapsed debris arranged too neatly to be natural. Inside, the air went still and damp. Lights flickered to life one by one, low-watt, red-shaded, designed to preserve night vision. The tunnel sloped gently downward, limestone walls sweating cold. The vibration grew stronger. Garrick stopped at a junction and pressed his ear to the wall. "They're running ground-penetrating radar," he said, "looking for voids. They don't know this place listens back." They moved deeper, the tunnel opening into a chamber reinforced with old timbers and steel ribs. Equipment hummed behind a mesh barrier, servers in rugged housings, cables bundled with care. This wasn't abandonment. This was infrastructure. Cole scanned. Cameras covered the main access, but blind spots remained, left deliberately perhaps to funnel movement. He nodded to Garrick. "Where's the exit?" "Two," Garrick said. "One vertical, one long." He pointed. "The long one goes to a flume. Old logging chute, dangerous in snow. The vertical drops into a vault the county forgot." Rowan's breath caught. "My husband wrote about a vault." Garrick nodded. "He found it. They found him." Milo swallowed. Briggs leaned into his leg, grounding him. Cole felt the old anger stir, cold and clean. He kept it leashed. A voice echoed faintly through the tunnel, amplified and distorted by stone. "You're trespassing," it said, calm and confident. "Come out slowly." Cade Mercer stepped into view at the far end. Flanked by two men dressed in matte black, faces obscured, movements synchronized. Cade looked unchanged, trim beard, composed posture, but his eyes were brighter now, sharpened by certainty. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't need to. The message carried without it. "End of the line," Cade said. "Hand over what you took. Everyone walks." Cole took one step forward, then stopped. "You're standing on a fault," he said. "You feel that?" Cade smiled. "I feel leverage." The ground answered first. A deeper thrum rolled through the chamber, the equipment's rhythm shifting. Garrick's eyes lit. "They hit a cavity," he murmured. "Too hard." Cole didn't wait. "Flume," he said to Rowan. "Now!" He moved with the decision already made, grabbing the shielded box from his pack and tossing it to Garrick. "Get this to the vault," he said. Hide it." Garrick caught it without fumbling. "I'll bury it where the rock won't talk," he said, and vanished into the side passage with surprising speed. Cade's smile fell. He raised a hand, signaling his men forward. Briggs surged, not barking, just moving, intercepting the nearest man with a shoulder and teeth, targeting grip and balance, not flesh. Milo shouted Briggs's name, then ran when Rowan pulled him, feet skidding as they bolted toward the flume tunnel. Cole took the second man down with momentum and leverage, using the wall and gravity rather than fists. The third hesitated, recalculated, and backed off as the vibration spiked. A crack split the ceiling with a sound like a rifle shot. Dust fell, stone shifted. Cade shouted an order, too late. The floor lurched, a controlled collapse turning chaotic as the cavity gave way. Cole grabbed Cade by the jacket and shoved him toward the exit, not out of mercy, but math. More bodies meant less movement. Cade stumbled, recovered, and ran. Cole sprinted after Rowan and Milo, boots pounding, lungs burning. The flume tunnel yawned ahead, a long sloped chute lined with old timbers slick with ice. Wind roared through it like a throat. Rowan didn't hesitate. She slid, dragging Milo between her legs, one arm hooked around him. Briggs launched past them, skidding but staying upright, turning to block as Cole followed. They burst out into white space, the chute spitting them into a drifted clearing below the quarry. Snow swallowed sound. Above, stone thundered as the chamber settled into a new shape. Cole rolled to his feet, scanning. Rowan hugged Milo, checking him head to toe. Briggs stood over them, chest heaving. She eyes up. The ground stilled. For now. Cole looked back at the scarred face of the mountain and knew two things with certainty. They had bought time, and they had chosen a path that wouldn't narrow again. They didn't stop running until the air thinned and the snow changed texture, the fine powder giving way to a heavier crust that squeaked underfoot. Cole slowed them only when the trees closed in tight enough to swallow sound. The flume had spit them into a shallow basin below the quarry, and from there the land folded into a maze of timber and rock that knew how to hide people who listened. He cut the pace, raised a fist, and the small group froze as one. Rowan bent, hands on her knees, breath sharp but controlled. Milo leaned into Briggs, fingers buried in the dog's ruff, eyes scanning where Cole scanned. Briggs stood tall now, chest expanding and contracting fast, ears swiveling independently as if reading a map invisible to humans. Cole crouched and pressed his palm to the snow. No vibration. The ground had gone quiet. They moved again, slower, angled away from the quarry toward a ridgeline that offered sightlines without exposure. Cole chose the route by feel, following subtle cues, wind patterns that carried sound away, slopes that broke silhouettes, stands of young pine that bent instead of snapping under weight. This wasn't flight. It was placement. They reached an overlook as daylight thinned into a pale wash. From there, the quarry lay partly visible through breaks in the trees. Activity had spiked. Vehicles clustered at the rim like beetles, headlights stabbing at shadow. Men moved with purpose, not panic. Cole counted 3 teams, then stopped counting when it stopped helping. Rowan joined him, pulling her hood back just enough to see clearly. "They'll find the collapse," she said. "Yes," Cole replied. "No, they won't find what matters." He thought of Garrick, already deep in stone with the shielded box, and let the image settle. Trust wasn't blind, it was earned by pattern. Garrick had pattern. They needed a place to ground themselves, to plan without bleeding time. Cole led them down the far side of the ridge toward a stand of old aspens that marked a seasonal boundary. There, half buried in drift and brush, sat a fire lookout cabin long since retired, windows boarded, door reinforced with a bar cut from the same tree that once held the structure upright. Cole knew it. He'd slept there once during a winter that wouldn't end. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and dry wood. Snow filtered through gaps and melted on the floorboards. Cole set a small stove with practiced speed, coaxing flame from cold iron. Milo perched near the wall, watching the light grow, the tension in his shoulders easing by degrees. Briggs circled, then lay where he could see the door and the window at once. Rowan paced once, then stopped. "Atlas?" she said, not as a question. "He's stable," Cole said. "The clinic will hold." Rowan nodded, but worry etched deeper lines around her mouth. "If they can't find the beacon," she said, "they'll look for leverage." Cole met her eyes. "That's why we don't go back to town." A radio crackled faintly from Cole's pack. He adjusted the dial until voices sharpened. County traffic had shifted from logistics to posture, units reassigned, perimeters suggested without being named, the language of tightening. Another voice cut through, unfamiliar, calm, authoritative. "This is Special Agent Mara Ives with the Department of the Interior. I'm requesting confirmation on North Line access. Repeat, requesting confirmation." Rowan stiffened. Interior. Cole listened, then adjusted again. The voice returned, closer. "We're receiving conflicting reports. Environmental compliance flagged. Any on-site supervisors respond." He exhaled slowly. "That's new," he said. They didn't answer immediately. They didn't need to. The radio kept talking to itself, the way systems did when something had already moved beyond local control. As if summoned by the shift, footsteps approached the cabin, one set, careful, unhurried. Cole extinguished the stove and gestured. Rowan drew Milo back. Briggs rose, silent, tail low. The knock was soft, deliberate. Cole opened the door a hand's width. The woman outside stood square to the frame, hands visible, posture open but ready. She was early 40s, medium height, athletic build under a parka worn for function rather than appearance. Her hair was dark, cut blunt at the jaw, flecked with gray she didn't hide. Her face carried the calm symmetry of someone used to being believed, eyes sharp and steady, mouth set in a line that suggested patience with limits. Snow clung to her shoulders without melting. "Mara Ives," she said quietly. "Interior." Cole studied her, then opened the door fully. "You're off the map," he said. She smiled once. "Maps are suggestions." Inside, Mara took in the room quickly, eyes landing on Milo, then Briggs, then Rowan. She nodded to Rowan. "Mrs. Hale." Rowan's chin lifted. "You know me." "I know your husband's reports," Mara said, "or what's left of them." They spoke plainly then. Mara explained how Northline had tripped sensors tied to water tables miles downstream, how the collapse had lit up satellites, how certain contractors had scrambled too quickly for nothing to be wrong. She didn't overstate. She didn't soften. She laid facts down like stones and let their weight speak. "What do you need?" Rowan asked. Mara's gaze shifted to Cole. "A witness," she said, "and whatever you took out of there." Cole shook his head once. "It's buried where your people won't find it by accident." Mara nodded, accepting the condition. "Then we do this properly," she said. "I'll secure the site. I'll keep local interference away as long as I can." Her eyes flicked toward the quarry, invisible from here but present all the same. "They won't like that." "They already don't," Cole said. Mara's mouth twitched. "Fair." A distant thud rolled through the trees, not a collapse this time, but controlled detonation. The quarry answered back in echoes. Briggs's ears snapped up. "They're sanitizing," Mara said. "That means time." They moved with purpose. Mara radioed in coordinates, her voice crisp. Helicopters would come, teams would follow, not immediately, not cleanly. Cole listened and weighed. He knew the space between promises and arrival. Before Dawn could decide which side it belonged to, headlights cut through the trees below, 2 vehicles, then a third. Cole recognized the pattern. Cade Mercer didn't waste opportunities. "Back way," Cole said, "now." They slipped out as Mara finished a transmission, moving downslope where sound bled into the creek bed. Snow swallowed footprints. The vehicles fanned out above them, engines idling. It was doors opening and closing. Voices carried, confident, close. At the creek, Briggs stopped and angled his head, scenting upstream. Cole nodded. They crossed in shallow water, boots numbing instantly, then doubled back along the bank before cutting into brush. The trick worked. The voices passed within yards without finding them. They reached a secondary rise as the first rotor wash beat the trees. A helicopter swept in low, floodlights punching holes in the forest. The sound changed everything. Men scattered, orders sharpened. Control asserted itself from above. Mara stood with Cole at the edge of the clearing, watching the valley transform. "This will end," she said. "Not neatly, but it will end." Cole didn't answer. He watched the lights, the men, the way the ground held its quiet now that someone else was listening. When the helicopter banked and moved off toward Northline, Cole turned. "We're not done," he said. Mara met his gaze. "No," she agreed. "We're just heard." They would regroup at first light, bring Atlas back into the circle, and choose the last move with care. The valley had spoken. Now it would demand witnesses. The valley did not erupt into chaos the way people imagined these things did. There were no sirens screaming nonstop, no dramatic cordons snapping shut in a single moment. Instead, authority arrived the way winter always did in Frosthaven, layer by layer, patient, unavoidable. By mid-morning, the soundscape had changed. Helicopter rotors came and went with measured regularity. Radios spoke in clipped tones that carried confidence rather than bluster. The quarry, once a rumor with teeth, became a location with coordinates and paperwork. Cole watched it unfold from a low rise above the tree line, the lookout cabin now behind them, and unnecessary. Rowan sat on a fallen log with Milo tucked close, her arm wrapped around his shoulders in a way that was protective without being smothering. Milo no longer shook. But he watched the helicopters with open curiosity, the fear that had sharpened him now settling into something steadier. Attention. Briggs lay at Cole's feet, chin on his paws, eyes tracking movement below. His breathing had slowed, the work done for now. Mara Ives returned just before noon, walking uphill alone, helmet clipped to her pack, posture loose but deliberate. Up close, the lines at the corners of her eyes were more visible, etched by years of reading people under pressure. She looked like someone who had learned early that authority was most effective when it didn't announce itself. She stopped a respectful distance away, letting the quiet do some of the talking. "It's secured," she said. "Northline's shut down pending investigation. Environmental, labor, federal land use. The list is long." Her mouth tightened briefly. Your friend Mercer disappeared before we could speak with him." Cole nodded. "He's good at that." Mara glanced at Rowan and Milo. "We located your husband's final reports," she said to Rowan. "They were filed under an innocuous project name and buried. He was close enough that someone decided he shouldn't finish." She let that sit. "We're reopening his case." Rowan closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there were tears there, but they didn't spill. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't gratitude. It was acknowledgement. Mara's gaze returned to Cole. "And the device?" "It's safe," Cole replied, "where the ground keeps its mouth shut." "That's good," Mara said. "We'll want it eventually, but not yet." She hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing." Cole accepted the words without visible reaction, but he'd learned long ago that validation didn't repair damage, it only confirmed alignment. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we move carefully," Mara said. "Local law enforcement will be sidelined until we sort out conflicts. Some people will be angry, some will be afraid." Her eyes flicked toward Frosthaven, invisible beyond the ridge. Change always feels like loss before it feels like relief. They parted without ceremony. Mara walked back down the slope, already speaking into a radio, already absorbed by the next layer of consequence. The helicopters thinned. The valley exhaled. By late afternoon, Cole drove them back toward town. The clinic was the first stop. Dr. Elaine Morrow met them at the door, sleeves rolled, hair escaping its knot. She looked tired but satisfied. "He's awake," she said, "and impatient." Atlas lay on a padded mat near the window, bandage clean, eyes bright. He lifted his head when Milo entered and thumped his tail with more force than seemed advisable. Briggs surged forward, stopping short on Cole's quiet command, then approached in a slow arc. The two dogs touched noses, a brief exchange of breath and understanding, then settled side by side. Atlas leaned into Briggs's shoulder, accepting support without embarrassment. Dr. Morrow crouched beside them. "He'll need time," she said. "Weeks, but he's resilient. You don't get that kind of composure by accident." She glanced at Cole. "He's worked." "Yes," Cole said simply. They stayed long enough to hear the plan. Follow-up care, controlled movement, return visits. Then they stepped back into daylight that felt different from the morning's pallor. Lighter. Less watched. Frosthaven itself adjusted more slowly. Over the next days, trucks bearing unfamiliar logos rolled through. Inspectors came, samples were taken, meetings were held behind closed doors that stayed closed longer than usual. Sheriff Denton was placed on administrative leave pending review. He did not come to the diner anymore. People noticed. They didn't comment right away. Cole kept to his routines, though the shape of them changed. He cut more wood than he needed and stacked it higher. He checked the relay station twice. He walked Briggs along the river at dawn, listening to the ice shift and pop as temperatures climbed. Rowan returned to the diner, but she also began organizing. Documents, timelines, names. Milo went back to school, carrying a quiet pride that didn't ask for attention. Atlas came home a week later, limping but alert, eyes still reading everything. On a cold, clear morning not long after, Cole stood on his porch with a mug warming his hands. Atlas lay on the steps, bandaged legs stretched carefully, tail wagging in a slow, content rhythm. Briggs sat upright beside him, watchful but relaxed. The valley lay open below, scarred in places, healing in others. Rowan approached along the path, Milo at her side. She looked different now, not lighter exactly, but less braced for impact. She held a folder against her chest. "Mara called," she said. "They're pressing charges, and they found him." Her voice steadied. "What's left of him?" Cole nodded, offering space. Rowan inhaled, then exhaled. "It matters," she said. "Knowing." Milo knelt beside Atlas, pressing his forehead to the dog's. Atlas licked his cheek, careful and deliberate. Milo laughed, a sound that carried farther than the wind. Rowan looked at Cole. "We're staying," she said. "This place doesn't get to take everything." Cole met her gaze. "It doesn't," he agreed. The work of rebuilding would be quiet and unglamorous. Wells tested clean again, trails reopened, trust returned in increments. People nodded more, asked fewer questions. The valley learned how to hold itself differently. One evening, as the sun slid behind the ridge and painted the snow in amber, Cole sat on the porch steps with both dogs at his feet. He felt the ache in his joints, the familiar reminder of years he couldn't change. He also felt something else, a steadiness that didn't require vigilance every second. The ground beneath him was quiet, but not empty. It held. He didn't think about the past as a place anymore, or he thought of it as a teacher that had finished speaking. Frosthaven wasn't a refuge from the world. It was part of it, honest and imperfect and worth the effort. When Atlas shifted and rested his head on Cole's boot, Cole smiled, small and genuine. The valley had asked for witnesses. It had received them. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they come quietly, through the hands of a tired man who refuses to look away, the courage of a child who chooses compassion over fear, and the unwavering loyalty of an animal who loves without conditions. This story reminds us that God often works through ordinary people placed in extraordinary moments. Not to make them famous, not to make them powerful, but to remind the world that kindness still has strength and that no life, no matter how small or forgotten, is invisible to Him. In our daily lives, we may never face a blizzard or a hidden danger in the woods, but every day we are given moments to choose, to help instead of pass by, to protect instead of stay silent, to believe that even in the darkest valleys, God is still guiding our steps, often through us. If this story touched your heart, let it move beyond the screen. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. And if you believe that compassion can still change lives, subscribe to this channel so we can keep sharing stories that matter. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He protect the weary, heal the wounded, and give you the strength to be someone's miracle when the moment calls for it. You are not alone, and neither are those who still need saving. God bless.